Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about All Quiet on the Western Front. All Quiet on the Western Front is a German epic anti-war film based on Erich Remarque's novel of the same name, and tells the story of Paul Baumer, a young German man who decides to enlist in the German army with his friends from school to defend his country. After being stationed in the Western Front, his romanticized vision of the war is quickly shattered to pieces. Over the course of 18 months, Paul and his fellow soldiers endure the hell of the war as it slowly approaches its end. As politicians scramble to agree to an armistice, Paul loses hope for the future and becomes a different man from who he once was. I read the novel a long time ago when I was in high school and even watched the TV film starring Ernest Borgnine, and I remember both of them making a huge impression on me. They shed a new light for me on just how devastating and horrific the First World War was, and I'm happy to say that this new version does so once again. I'm still in awe over just how good this movie is. It retains all of the novel's themes regarding the impact of war on soldiers, and does so in a way that feels fresh, thanks to its amazing attention to detail with its technical presentation, representation of its time period, and the sympathetic portrayal of its protagonist. As always, Paul Baumer is the vehicle that drives the story forward. He's instantly likable on account of his kind heart, dedication to serving his country, and wanting to do the right thing by others. This makes his transformation that much more heartbreaking to see as he starts to lose this disposition. We see the war unfold in his eyes and feel just as surprised as he does when he has to experience the horrors of war in so many ways no one should have to see. He's forced to grow up fast when things like dead bodies, bombshells, starvation, and the constant threat of death become a normal everyday occurrence. I liked how subtle his change is over the course of the story. He has the same shock as his fellow men do when the grim reality of the war presents itself, but it's not until he becomes more immersed in it over time that he starts to shift from one perspective to another, and it's interesting to see how his actor portrays this. He goes from being an idealistic boy to a battle-hardened man who still shows some compassion to an outright machine of war who loses himself completely. It was disturbing to see him become so shaped by the trauma and horror around him, which in turn made me become deeply attached to him and his fellow soldiers. It's great to see other characters from the story here alongside Paul. It's been a while since I read the novel, so I don't remember all the characters, but key figures like Kropp, Mueller, Tjaden, and Kat all appear once again and contribute to the story in their own unique way. The deaths of Paul's fellow soldiers are one of the main factors that have the biggest impact on him and his ongoing perception of the world. Even as the war nears its end, he has to continue living a life without his friends and brothers in arms, and this is just one of many things that go on to have a growing influence on him. By far the biggest one, though, is the war itself, and I don't think I've seen a more impressive depiction of World War I than this. The sheer scale of the war itself and how all the historical elements are presented in it would be more than enough to win me over, but the filmmakers went so many steps beyond in this regard, it's simply mind-blowing. To start, the actual conflicts are portrayed in brutal fashion. Soldiers get shot, maimed, burned, and mutilated, and rarely die instantly from their grievous wounds. Battlefields are punctuated with the screams of the dying and bodies of the dead, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions, making for a terrifyingly immersive experience. But sometimes, it's the scenes without so much fire and brimstone that end up being the most unnerving. From the abandoned towns and countryside homes to the desolate hellscape of no man's land, every place the characters go has this foreboding feeling to it, which leaves the viewer to imagine the kinds of horrors that have and will take place. There's a consistently dirty and dreadful atmosphere conveyed throughout the movie. Characters are almost always caked in dirt, blood, and other kinds of filth, and carry battle trauma on their faces in virtually every scene. Their very presence alone speaks volumes on just how horrible the war really was. The movie doesn't get entirely bogged down by the emotional weight of the story, though. Soldiers build camaraderie, share jokes and stories, and get involved in shenanigans the same way any other young man their age would. The brief moments of joy they share with each other lighten the mood of the story when necessary, and serve as a reminder of the value that is their humanity. That last point is especially important considering how much the soldiers are commodified throughout the war, and even civilians supporting them from home too. There's something unsettling about how soldiers' clothes are recycled from dead bodies and cleaned to be used again for the next batch of soldiers, also that they can keep a war machine going that nobody wants. And it's at this point that I have to commend the filmmakers for how faithful of a representation they made when it comes to the time period that this movie takes place in. All of the costumes, props, and set designs look authentic to the era and really help bring the movie's world to life, even with so much death present in it. There's definitely more of an emphasis when it comes to depicting the Western Front, but I appreciate that the movie shows additional scenes highlighting the more political aspect of the war. These scenes are carried by Daniel Bruhl's performance as Matthias Erzberger, and he does an amazing job in his performance. It's through him that the audience gets to see how much wear and tear the war is having, not just on soldiers, but on the people back home too. Obviously the level of impact between the two is quite different, but it still goes to show how much pain and suffering war brings to people, and Brühl is phenomenal in communicating the struggle in a subtle but effective way. Something I noticed about this movie that quickly became my favorite thing about it is how much style there is to the cinematography. Of all the war movies I've seen, this one has probably the best visual aesthetics I've ever had the pleasure of seeing, and it goes beyond just being eye candy. The movie makes excellent use of tracking shots, both in battle scenes to maintain focus in the heat of the action, and outside of them where characters investigate areas, building suspense as they do. The camera movement is steady and fluid, so it's always easy to tell what exactly is happening on screen, which I appreciate. There's also a variety of landscape shots which I adored, not just because they look beautiful, although they definitely do, but they also represent how much we as humans are a part of this world as any other animal is, and yet we're capable of so much wanton destruction. The moments of peace with the landscape shots are both incredible at first glance and depressing the longer one thinks about how they connect to everything else in the movie. The way the movie employs its soundtrack is also interesting. There's a recurring tritone motif that grounds the audience into the dark reality of the war. Marching music interjects now and then to reaffirm the military doctrine the soldiers are forced to endure, and the lack of a bombastic score in favor of a more sinister ambience emphasizes the grittiness and tension of the battle scenes. Everything about how this movie looks and sounds is sublime. As weird as this might sound, I appreciate how bleak the movie is when it comes to its tone. Aside from the occasional morale boost here and there, the movie knows exactly how to portray its world and the characters living in it. It's not meant to be a story about heroes fighting to save their country, but about boys who lose their innocence and lives for the sake of a few leaders in charge. Paul and his fellow soldiers never had the chance to become men in their own right, as they're changed into whatever the war turns them into and return home to an unrecognizable society that has moved on without them. In this regard, I applaud the filmmakers for showing how much the brutality of war costs while still acknowledging the sacrifices made by the soldiers who fought in this war. If there was any sort of complaint I could be forced to drum up, it'd be the jump between time periods from when the movie starts in 1917 to when Paul is well underway in the war in 1918. It's just a bit jarring in how it proceeds and feels a little weird to suddenly see Paul have so much experience under his belt, but the movie's able to recover from this and still remains riveting. There are a few things about this version that are different from the novel, but they never hurt the movie so much as they help it to make it more distinct from the novel and other adaptations. More importantly though, the story's message remains as timeless as it has always been since Erich Remarque wrote it. Between the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war and other armed conflicts in the world now, it seems nothing has really changed regarding how leaders of civilization approach conflict and how futile wars end up being. I'm glad that movies like this continue to be made, to show the consequences of what happens when the actions of a few power-hungry leaders cause so much misery for humanity as a whole. Overall, All Quiet on the Western Front is a powerfully moving anti-war film that is made more poignant with its messages thanks to its epic scale. If you like war movies and you're looking for something that's bleak in tone while still promoting a meaningful message, you have to check this one out. It is one of the must-see movies of the year. Almost 100 years after Erich Remarque's novel was released, everything about his story remains more important than ever, and this new version ensures in greater detail, scale, and emotional weight than ever before that his legacy will live on, and that in the end, there are no winners in war, Western or otherwise. What did you think about this movie? Did you love it as much as I did, or were there some things about it that you took issue with? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of All Quiet on the Western Front. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part where next time I review the Dutch crime film, The Takeover. Bye bye!